Piano Concerto No. 1 by Tchaikovsky. Beatrice Rana is the pianist, and she's accompanied here by the Santa Cecilia Orchestra in Rome, conducted by Sir Antonio Pappano. And this is the beginning of today's programme in our four-part feature celebrating the 60th birthday of the great and acclaimed opera and orchestral conductor Sir Antonio Pappano, who is in fact much more than even that. Today, in Sir Antonio Pappano, Mission for Music, we're focusing particularly on him as an accompanist in concerti and also as a virtuoso pianist accompanying some of today's greatest singers. And in addition to that, we're hearing him as an inspirational educator and broadcaster and presenter on music, arousing millions of people all over the world to the magic and power of classical music. And we'll also have time for just a few more extracts from his international award-winning performances and recordings of opera. The pianist in this recording of Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto, Beatrice Rana, is one of many young artists that Sir Antonio Pappano has encouraged, and even more, he has nurtured them. She's now enjoying a spectacularly successful career at just 26 years old, and Sir Antonio has been a major inspiration for her.
I first worked with him for our recording for Warner Classics with the Tchaikovsky and Prokofiev concerti. Especially the Tchaikovsky is a very well-known piece and most played one. And, you know, being a young musician and being the first time that I worked with him, I didn't know what to expect, but I was thinking that we would just have a brief meeting before the rehearsals with the orchestra, just to get to know each other and to know the tempi. And after the first meeting with him, I realized that we spent 4 hours together just to get through the concerti and to get an idea of each other and to get to know better, because it's very important. And first of all, I didn't realize that 4 hours had gone just like that. So the time was just flying, you know. And on the other hand, I was so full of things to do and inspiration. He really gave me so many suggestions and such a great input to do better. So I really think he is one of the most generous artists that I have ever met. I love this concerto, but sometimes it's quite hard because being played so often, it's full of traditions and sometimes bad habits in the orchestras, because they get to play with so many soloists and so many conductors, and sometimes it's really difficult to look at the score as the first time. But what I found really amazing with Tony is that really there was this attempt to get to the origin of the concerto and, to look carefully at this amazing score, because besides being such a popular concerto, it's a great one and full of so many details, and also very delicate in the balance and in the style. What I really thought is that I found finally a conductor that could express not only the drama of the concerto, but also sometimes, the lightness, because the concerto is so related also to the ballet music and also the folklore that comes in certain parts. It's very important in this concerto to have a vivid imagination, and that's what I found in Tony, and what he asked me to, because he was such a great inspiration for doing better. It's also very impressive that Tony Pappano is such a good pianist. I mean, being so busy with such a schedule as a conductor, from, just conducting one night the opera and the other night a symphony in Rome, and his schedule. But I was also very impressed with his pianist skills, especially because he is a fantastic pianist. You know, I attended his concert in Rome last December when he was playing Carnaval des Animaux with Marta Argerich. And you know, it's not easy to play with Marta, and he did so well. And I think I didn't meet so many gifted persons in my life as Tony Pappano.
Kangaroos from The Carnival of the Animals by Saint-Saëns. Marta Argerich and Sir Antonio Pappano were the two pianists, sounding like one pianist with four hands. And one of today's most brilliant pianists, Beatrice Rana, said before that Tony Pappano is a fantastic pianist. He didn't opt for a solo career as a pianist, but he could have done so if he'd wanted to, because he's a true virtuoso of the instrument. And that is the jewel in the crown for some of the great singers he conducts when he accompanies them in recitals, which he loves to do.
I don't have enough time to spend as much time as I would like at the piano, and this makes me quite sad. But even if I spend 5 minutes at the piano, I pick up something. I'm made aware of something. You know, when you're touching the keys, when you're making the music yourself, and with all the, I say this in a positive way, all the baggage that I have in my ear and my head, in my heart, from all the conducting that I do and all the sounds that I've heard, I'm able to apply and to think through the piano about how music actually works, how sound works. And so I experiment in a certain way on myself at the piano. And this has been incredibly enriching, to be involved in the song repertoire with artists like Bostrich, Joyce DiDonato. You know, I'm going to be doing a recital with Matthias Görner at the end of this season. I've played with Tom Hampson and people like this, Dmitri Vorostovsky, may he rest in peace. Again, the fascination of harmony and word and little stories but maximum effect. It's fantastic. The idea of how I can make color and how, you know, bring support and create an environment for a singer to give of their best. It's really wonderful.
Well, a composer who made especially virtuoso demands on the pianist as accompanist in his songs was Hugo Wolf. Coming up now is his Abschied, Goodbye, one of his copious settings of poems by Eduard Mörike, which Antonio Pappano has recorded accompanying the tenor Ian Bostridge. Without knocking, a man one evening enters my room. I have the honour, sir, to be your critic. He instantly takes my lamp in his hand, inspects at length my shadow on the wall, moves back and forth. Now, young man, be so good as to view your nose from the side. You'll admit that it is a monstrosity. What? Good God, you're right. Bless my soul, I never thought in all my life I had a nose of such cosmic size. The man said various other things, what, I truly no longer recall. Maybe he thought I should confess to him. At last he got up. I lit his way. As we stood at the top of the stairs, I gave him, in the best of spirits, a wee little kick on his derrière. Goodness me, what a rumbling, a tumbling, a stumbling. I have never before seen the like. Never in all my born days have I seen a man go downstairs so fast.
Unangeklopft ein Herr tritt abends bei mir ein. Ich habe die Ehre, Ihr Rezensent zu sein. Sofort nimmt das Licht in die Hand, besieht lang meinen Schatten an der Wand, rückt nah und fern. Nun, lieber junger Mann, sehen Sie doch den Bericht nach Ihrer Nase von der Seite an. Sie geben zu, dass das ein Ausdruck ist. Was? Eine Wetter? Gewiss. Ei, Hasen, ich dachte nicht, all mein Liebtage nicht, dass ich so eine Weltnase für die Gesicht. Der Mann sprach noch Verschiedenes hin und her. Ich weiß, auf meiner Ehre nicht mehr. Meinte vielleicht, ich sollt ihm beichten. Zuletzt stand er auf, ich tat ihm leuchten. Wie wir nun an der Treppe sind, da geb ich ihm ganz froh gesinnt einen kleinen Tritt, nur so von hinten aus gesessen ist. Ein Hagen hat das ein Gerümpel, ein Geporzel, ein Geporzel. Dergleichen hab ich nie gesehen, all mein Lebtage nicht gesehen. Einen Mädchen so rasch die Treppen abgehen.
Abschied, Hugo Wolf's setting of the poem by Edvard Mörike. Ian Bostridge was accompanied by Sir Antonio Pappano. And new and upcoming young pianists, as well as new and upcoming young singers, are having inspirational experiences with Sir Antonio in masterclasses he is giving with them in many places. And these are all part of his devoted commitment to young people. He spent much of this year's summer working with young people, including students and also youth orchestras, and he brought the National Youth Orchestra of the United States of America to the Edinburgh International Festival and also to the BBC Proms, as he described in advance of that when he was speaking to us for this programme last April.
It's a relationship that I'm starting. Clive Gillinson of Carnegie Hall asked me, and I was very happy to take that up. But it's not only that. At the end of this season, I'm going to be doing singer masterclasses, something that I do here at the Opera House. But I'm going to be doing them at Aldeburgh for a week. And then I'm going, next year I think I'm going to Verbier again. I've rekindled a relationship with them. I work with an orchestra, the Filarmonica di Benevento, which is a town in South Italy, which is near where my parents are from. It's an orchestra I work with. I'm going to be working with the Fiesole Academy Orchestra in Italy. So you see, I'm trying to put my time where my mouth is. I'm going to be working with the Britten Sinfonia next year. And that's very important for me because I know young musicians need to be nurtured in a certain way, not just to be conducted at, but they need to be told things about life, about what's underneath the skin of the music they're playing. And I enjoy doing that, and I can do it. and I need to do it, as much for me as for them.
And young performers and also young audiences are among the many wide-ranging priorities for Sir Antonio Pappano in his role as the music director of the Royal Opera House Covent Garden, which is where he was speaking to us for this programme during his conducting of a run of performances of Verdi's La Forza del Destino.
In terms of young singers, I think we deal with that issue every day here. We have a young artist program, but knowing how, when, if to push a young singer onto the stage here and in what role, and or to create a long-term relationship with that singer, to really nurture them through even up to stardom, you know. That's something that's very much in my mind, in Peter Katana, my casting director's mind. In terms of repertoire, I think it's very, very important to try to unite the best possible cast for pieces that are perhaps not so often done. I mean, La Forza del Destino, everybody knows that it exists, but it's not often done. It's been 10 years since we last did it. And I had a reason to bring it back because I was able to put together this cast, or these casts, together with Peter. And choosing repertoire for repertoire's sake is not enough for me. You've got to make the best case for lesser known repertoire. And it's important that I keep the repertoire fresh or rediscovered, shall we say, because I've got to keep my orchestra and chorus interested. We can't just keep doing the same old things over and over again. I mean, every opera house has a certain amount of that. And look, there's nothing more wonderful than La Traviata and La Bohème and Le Nozze di Figaro, please, and Rigoletto. But there are other things to discover, and that's what it's very, very important to keep going in that direction with this house. Do I want more younger people to come into this opera house? Yes. Do we have schemes for that to make it affordable for them? Yes. Is it enough? No. Do younger people need to plan way in advance to get the cheaper tickets here? Yes. Is that something that younger people like to do? No. So, you know, it's a constant battle to try and keep this building relevant to people who are under the age of 50.
But you do, don't you, contribute to that ethos through your contributions to the Insight events and also to your work on television. It's all completely driven towards sharing these wonderful works and relating these works to all of us.
I think that conductors today have to find a way to share their knowledge with a bigger public than an orchestra. And sometimes you can speak in greater depth to the public, you know, spend more time talking in detail about the significance of certain moments or how a piece is put together or the composer and his tendencies and his style and his interests. Because in rehearsal, sometimes, you know, you're up against the clock sometimes, but we're in an information age and people want information. And with information, they are enriched. They are, shall we say, armed to confront what, in many cases, are awesome structures. The big Verdis, the big Mozarts, the Wagner, and then not to speak of the contemporary music. And that's where the conductor can be very, very helpful and elucidate, open doors, quell fires of fear that people do have towards opera. Some people, and I even understand it. You know, it's something in a foreign language, people up there singing, what is this about? And yet, the power and the magic of, and the seductive quality of music, when you put all that together and you put theater, lights, acting, makeup, and singing, and the orchestra, And these often were stories with universal truths. Sometimes I grant you simplistic stories, often saved by sublime music, but often stories that have a universal message. I think it's very, very important for culture, for our culture, and for growing up. Is it everything in this world? No. Is it important to go to the National Gallery or the Tate Modern or to the movies or to a rock concert? Of course it is, because that's culture too. But opera is a very, very powerful thing.
And this is how Sir Antonio Pappano brings that power to life in one of his pre-performance introductions at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden.
Good evening, everyone. La Forza del Destino. It's a long Russian novel, and they told me I only have a relatively short time to get into it. Very interesting. In its first version, one of the critiques of the piece was that it was too long. And the one thing that Verdi didn't change when he made the revision for La Scala was the length. He said that it was just an essential part of the structure of the piece, the timing of the piece, this unfolding of the drama. That said, the first act is one of his greatest creations because it's very, very compact and really jolts you. The end of the first act. The crux of the story is presented, and from there is born this long trajectory, this long voyage for each of the characters. Characters lost in their tragedies. One lost in his search for vengeance, and the other two lovers that actually never meet until the very end, as you heard our soloists talk about. So it's inherently has a very, very special melancholy, this piece. In the 1869 version, which we're performing, which is the revision that he made for La Scala, the overture was expanded, and it was turned into an overture that, in the traditional way, quoted several of the themes. And I'm going to play those for you, because I think they're very, very important milestones along the way. I want you to keep in mind the idea of Beethoven throughout this little talk, because I think the ideas of Beethoven, I mean, we have of course, this, I mean, you won't hear that exactly, but you do hear that three-note figure going to the fourth note. It also becomes this is Beethoven. You'll hear the similarities in a minute. But this knocking at the door, the knocking of destiny, if you like. The brass with the tang of this Spanish tang in the use of not the tuba but the chimbasso, very, very special, snarly bass trombone. And then now that theme, here you hear it in a very, very subdued manner, and that theme you'll hear throughout the evening, always associated with Leonora. Leonora, after Act 1, when her elopement with Don Alvaro goes terribly wrong, her father is accidentally shot, and the two are separated. She is on the run. She's on the run from her brother who's seeking vengeance for this terrible act. And you can hear the music chasing you with this sighing figure. And over and over and over again. She has three arias, two of which have this as the introduction.
The opening of Pace, Pace, mio Dio, Leonora's aria from Act 4 of Verdi's La Forza del Destino, The Force of Destiny, sung by Anna Netrebko at a live performance of the opera at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, with Sir Antonio Pappano conducting last April, illuminating for us here one of the points Sir Antonio was making in one of the Royal Opera House's invaluable insight events before. The insight events are when the general public have the opportunity to hear performers discuss operas they are taking part in at the Royal Opera House. And we're extremely grateful to the Royal Opera House for making those items available to us, as well as the next insight event that we'll be hearing in this programme. A connoisseur opera lover who takes every possible opportunity to see Antonio Pappano's informative introductions to operas is Anna Paula Gerard.
As an audience, he says things and plays music and gives us music in such a simple, profound way, which only a person who really knows what he's talking about can convey. He's understanding exactly what the composer was expecting, what the musicians should be doing, and to put it in such a simple and beautiful way, it's only very few genius and people with this talent that we can have.
Now, you've probably heard talk mention the Tristan chord that Wagner didn't invent. Chopin used it, Beethoven used it, Bach used it, but it's what Wagner does with this chord. The chord itself is this, which, when you listen to it, creates, there's a certain, there's almost a letting out of air when that chord hits. It's a depression. But what's important about that chord, which, I mean, I can talk to you about French sixth and subdominant and dominant. None of that's, for tonight, none of that's relevant. What's important to know is that it's introduced by a figure that is, it's a big skip, which creates, it's so long and finally resolves to something that is ambiguous. It's not an arrival, it's something that makes you feel a little bit off balance. It then resolves to something equally hanging in the air. Now, what I mean by that is the melody in itself, an extra bit of melody comes in on the oboe, and that resolves. That resolves. But the chords underneath it depress and don't resolve and suggest a key, maybe that, but no. I'll play it again. also the importance of this chord, the silence after it, which seems an eternity. That's what I call modern music. In the silence are the secrets. The same pattern. He repeats this, and all of a sudden you have the same pattern, but he goes up to another key, implying another key. Again, silence. This time a little bit shorter. And this time, instead of just going, it goes further. Syncopations, more pain. This time with an accent. He won't resolve this chord. He won't resolve it. Because he's... Wagner's genius is that he wants the music never to resolve. The love is never ending. The pain is never ending. There is no resolution. The only resolution comes at the very end of the opera, finally. And I'll play you that. You hear finally the theme for the last time. And listen. That's 4.5 hours later. But it's true. That's the journey to that chord.
the prelude to Wagner's Tristan und Isolde. Sir Antonio Pappano conducting the Royal Opera House Orchestra. And our great thanks once again to the Royal Opera House for so generously making available the Insight event before of Sir Antonio discussing that music. As he approaches his 60th birthday, Sir Antonio's thrilling and moving performances and his ingenious introductions to the music he so passionately loves has won him and the music he performs a huge following, and a following that is yet forever increasing. And it's among people of all ages, young, older and old, all around the world. His acclaimed work as music director of both the Royal Opera House Covent Garden in London and the Santa Cecilia Orchestra in Rome is the inspiration now for millions through television, YouTube, radio and CDs, as much in the domain of orchestral music as it is in the world of opera, to which he is so very specially deeply attached.
I feel it's a beautiful way to live. It's an exciting way to live because living through stories and through other people's adventures is food for thought for you as a person. And now, of course, if you're just a couch potato and you do nothing and you don't get out in the air and don't see the city you live in, and I think that's the danger of my job, is to be caught in this wonderful life, but that's it. And so the greatest efforts that I try to make are to get out, to go to a restaurant, go see the city, breathe, go for a walk, go to see a play, go to see a movie, have dinner with friends. That for me is the difficult part, because the music it's an easy life for me, because that's all I really want. Although music in itself can be quite complex and difficult and demanding. But I want to continue just sharing. I've got enough practice at doing it now. I might as well continue.
Sir Antonio Pappano, speaking to us at the Royal Opera House Covent Garden, specially for this programme last April. And there is no more extraordinary example of Sir Antonio's mastery as a communicator and a sharer of music than his conducting of the tragic masterpiece of Puccini, Madama Butterfly. One of the most acclaimed of all award-winning recordings is his performance and that of the great soprano Angela Gheorghiu, who sang the title role of Cho-Cho-san, Madama Butterfly. Their partnership in this recording must stand as one of the most supreme achievements in the operatic annals. At the end of the opera, after waiting for 3 years in the conviction that her husband Pinkerton will return to her after his travels, Madama Butterfly is crushed when finally she realizes that not only has Pinkerton abandoned her, but he has also taken on an American wife back home, and she has come to ask Butterfly if she and Pinkerton can take to America with them the child that was born to Butterfly 9 months after her wedding, her so-called wedding night with Pinkerton. Butterfly has agreed on one condition, that Pinkerton must collect the boy himself in half an hour's time. Having abandoned her Japanese religion to take on Pinkerton's Western Christian faith, she was abandoned by her own family on her wedding night 3 years earlier. Now she is totally deserted and forsaken by Pinkerton, and she has no alternative but to do what her father had done when he had been dishonoured, commit ritual suicide in the form of harikari. To die with honour is preferable than to live in dishonour, she sings as she prepares to do this. But then, suddenly, her faithful maidservant Suzuki lets her little child into the room. She takes him in her arms, bids him an emotional farewell, and then blindfolds him. Then, behind a screen, she plunges her father's dagger into her throat. As she lies dying, suddenly Pinkerton rushes in desperately with Sharpless, the American consul. And as Butterfly just manages to point to the child, she dies. The final bars of the opera are marked by Puccini allargando, broadening, then stentato, strong and forced, then molto allargando, greatly broadening, into the final bar, in which an unresolved chord is held, making the listener almost feel strangled with shock. After the tour de force performance of Angela Gheorghiu as Butterfly, the impact of the close of the opera under Sir Antonio Pappano's direction, in which he achieves a knife-edged precision and an explosive power as he meticulously observes Puccini's markings, is overwhelming.